Back into session. Um, want to apologize to our football players out here with our closed session going over a few minutes. And we're going to change the order of our 1:30. We're going to go to item 31, which is Supervisor Parks and your presentation right now.
Thank you. Westlake High School Warriors varsity football team. Westlake went undefeated with a 14-0 record. Fourth consecutive year Marmonte League champs. Won the CIF Southern Section Division 4 championship. Team ranked #1 by the Los Angeles Times computer rankings, our version of the BCS, based on 2,305 games played by 472 teams. Outstanding players include Michael Stewart, LA Times Ventura Northeast Player of the Year, Ventura County Star Offensive Player of the Year, Ventura County Star All-County Football Team, Los Angeles Times Lineman of the Year, Los Angeles Times All-Star Football Team. I would like to be able to come down to the mic, hand out some commendations if maybe Supervisor Bennett can join me. We also have Rudy Carpenter, the quarterback, Ventura County Stars All-County Football Team, Los Angeles Times All-Region Football Team, Steve Catena, I have that right? Katina. Offensive line, Ventura County Stars All-County Football Team, Los Angeles Times All-Region Football Team, and Greg Newman, linebacker, Ventura County Stars Defensive Player of the Year, Ventura County Stars All-County Football Team, Los Angeles Times All-Region Football Team. Jimmy Miller, defensive linebacker, tight end, Los Angeles Times Ventura Northeast Lineman of the Year, Stars All-County Football Team, Los Angeles Times All-Region Football Team. David Weiner, defensive lineman, Ventura County Stars All-County Football Team. Marcus Maddox, defensive back, Ventura County Stars All-County Football Team, Los Angeles Times All-Region Football Team. And of course, there's Coach Benker, Los Angeles Times Ventura Northeast Region Coach of the Year. I'm going to come on down, and if we can, I guess you're organized by your numbers, so we'll bring your commendations. I'm so glad to be able to say that my district has the #1 football team in the entire county, as far as I'm concerned, and to also have all my children going to that school makes it doubly pleasurable for me. So
I might add.
That's right, orange and blue. So we'll start with the team first and then go to the coaches. Okay, Marcus Maddox is first. Okay, we'll be able to get that to him. And then we have, you want to? Okay.
I'll read and you, Jason Saporito, right? Right. All right, great. Ryan Rule. Taj Mori. No, you missed Ryan. I've got one going and one coming. There we go. That's Ryan. Right. Okay. Then Danny Nugent. Garrett Mosley. Jason Berg. Ryan Merritt. Okay. Rudy Carpenter. Oh, there we go. Hold on. Maybe I grabbed it. I thought that was the replacement. There we go. This is the guy who's not here, right? Okay. Okay. Rudy Carpenter. Brian Anderson. Tormello. Okay. All right. Royce Rowan. Jason Wick. Brent Westerdoff. Andrew Manier. Brandon Hoffman. Brandon Sprout. Adam Crane. How about Jeff? Jeff Rappaport. David Weiner. Martin Reynosa. Okay, all right. Garrett Carpenter. Eric Tipton. Rosales. Okay. Jacob Rosales. Will Kang. Goodmanson. Mike Goodmanson. Cody Hardy. Micah Martin. Thank you. Matt Heilman. Manny Garcia. Chris Kennedy. Greg Newman. Michael Bowman. Jose Martinez. David Bartels. Ryan Sorensen. Bart Schuler. Bart Schuler. Sean Bird. Joseph Hoffman. Steve Gattina. I would never pronounce that Gattina. Yeah. Graham Hallisey. Wirtz. Jeff Wirtz. Sapita. Michael Sapita. What's that? Yeah. Okay. Marcus Bills. Jimmy Miller. Michael Stewart. All right. John Cheatwood. Travis Widener. Jeff Miller. We have certificates for the coaches here? Okay. And then for Coach Ron Rosigno, and your esteemed head coach, right, Coach Benkert.
Thank you so much. Congratulations. He had such a great group to work with. Incredible team. And you're done without.
Tell him I thought he was going to have some time. I think the world of that. You're really lucky. Yeah, you're lucky to have him. That's all right. Oh, yeah.
I played at Elko in '76.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That was playing for Chief Canal.
Yeah. Tell him that. I have to tell you guys that I'm glad you're here, but the team from District 1 is the team that you beat. So Supervisor Parks and I kind of had an inside bet about what was going to happen in that game. But congratulations, right? Glad you won.
Congratulations. Can I get a picture? Also, I'd like to be the coaches to say a word, and then maybe we can try and get a picture of the whole team together for the record, okay? Thank you. Coach, you want to comment?
Yeah. On behalf of the Westlake High School football team, I'd like to thank the county supervisors for having us down this afternoon. And I think more than a tremendous accomplishment in winning the CIF title and actually the state Division II title with a 14-0 record, these guys are excellent role models. I mean, midway through the season this year, a good portion of these guys donated their time on a Saturday morning to the Alzheimer's Walk in Thousand Oaks. They helped set up at 7 o'clock in the morning. I remember, Jason, I think you did it at 7 o'clock and also picked up at 12 o'clock. So we played on a Friday night game. At 7 o'clock in the morning, they were up setting up the Alzheimer's Walk. And at 12 o'clock, they came back after films and took it down for that tremendous organization. And there are 26 scholar athletes here with grade point averages above 3.0. There are 9 young men here that are going to sign college scholarships and have an opportunity to play college football on full athletic scholarships because of not only what they do on the football field, but what they do in the classroom. So I'm tremendously proud of them for their accomplishments on the football field, but I'm equally proud of them for their accomplishments in the community and in the classroom. So I thank you for having us here, and they're definitely well-deserved young men.
It really is a testimony to your great coaching, and I'm so proud of you all and so happy for you all. If you'd like to, can you all come back here and we'll line up along here and try to get a photo? The tall people in the back. Yeah. I know you're all getting a civics lessons today. Our staff have put together some introductions and get a little orientation about county government. So any of you might be some future politicians. That's a good idea. I know where's he? He's going to take the picture.
Martinez, move your head left. One opening right there. Martinez, off two. Martinez, move right left. Gonzalez, move right. Right. I'll be left right. Closer. Left, left. I'm like very far right now. I'm sorry. Come here, move your ass, dude. I want to kill you, man. You want me to move to? Everybody's blocking my face. I'm kneeling down. You're like 6'4". I'm not gonna block your face. That's yours?
All right. We will, congratulations, Supervisor Parks. That was well done, and I I hope that St. Bonnie's will be successful next year. If they can do that. All right. The item 30, approval of general plan amendment. Our other 130 item.
Chairman Bennett, members of the board, Dennis Hawkins is here from our staff to give a presentation as he's working his way to the podium. Hopefully you've all received Exhibit 6, an errata, and Dennis will review some of that for you. In fact, there's he has the new change in there, so great. Okay, good. Take it away, Dennis.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, I'm Dennis Hawkins with the County Planning Division. The matter before you is GPA 0401, and it's a staff-initiated amendment to the general plan that primarily updates the text, goals, policies, and programs of the hazards chapter and appendix of the county general plan. The proposed amendments reflects updated geotechnical information, expands the airport hazards chapter to address other transportation-related hazards, including aircraft, railroad, trucking, and pipeline incidents, and adds a new civil disturbance section addressing civil unrest, terrorism, and national security issues. The general plan amendment would also replace existing manually drawn general plan policy maps with computer-generated GIS maps. The general plan hazards update program was funded by grants from the State Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and the State Resources Agency Coastal Resource Grant Program. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this matter on November 20th, 2003, and recommended approval of the general plan amendment with revisions to the section on civil disturbance, which have been attached to your packet as Exhibit number 5. The Planning Commission recommends that your board find that the proposed amendments are categorically exempt from CEQA, that the proposed amendment is in the public interest and general welfare and good planning practice, and that the Planning Commission recommends that your board approve GPA 0401 as proposed by staff and with the revisions by the Planning Commission in Exhibit 5. Additionally, staff recommends that your board action include the changes identified in Exhibit 6, which the Planning Director referred to. These changes consist of minor clarifications and typographical corrections identified by various reviewers. Mr. Dale Carnathan with the Sheriff's Department Office of Emergency Services is here today and can answer any questions related to the civil disturbance issues. And in addition, Mr. Jim Otusa, a geologist with the County Public Works Agency, is also present and can answer questions pertaining to geotechnical hazards. This concludes the staff presentation unless there are questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Any questions for staff? Supervisor Michaels.
Just one. And I may have missed it when I was reading, but I don't see a goal, if you will, of compatibility and interoperability of, at least as far as we can go, county agencies during civil unrest or terrorist incident. Did I miss that? Was that discussed at all as a goal?
Is there a goal for civil unrest? Yes, there is.
Okay. I missed it, and I apologize. I didn't find it.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Supervisor Parks.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One is sometimes you have a crossover between hazards when, for example, you have let's say you have a fire that affects, let's say it goes over towards Rocketdyne and you end up having you have combination events, and I'm wondering if you have looked at some of those.
Such as?
Okay, I know you have looked at things like flooding and landslides and the effects of the two. I'm just wondering, sometimes you can get a combined increased hazard as a result of 2 hazards occurring at the same time.
That can happen. It's just easier to organize the general plan in discrete sections rather than to talk about all of the various hazards that can happen at one time. It's certainly possible that you could have a fire that also includes hazardous materials, or floods that also
cause
affect
landslides.
landslides and so forth.
And then also you have, in some areas you've talked about, I think in ground shaking, where you have the potential impacts to infrastructure, including, cell antennas or the grounding of wires and things like that. There are also places in the county where you have high pressure gas lines in landslides, in recognized landslides. To me, that sounds like in those instances it should be good to call those out in the report.
The natural gas lines are identified, but the fire marshal asked that we not include the specific mapping in the general plan for homeland security issues. But yes, all those have been mapped. They're provided to the sheriff's department and other responding agencies and to county planners.
Okay, and do you do a combined, while it's good to know where all the high pressure gas lines are
And the oil lines.
Do you combine it with the other information that you have in here, as where the landslides are, for example,
Yes.
and if there's the gas
Yes, all
line
the
in
maps
the
can,
landslide?
under the GIS program, which I spoke of, allows that all of those items can be layered, and you can look at hazards underneath the pipelines.
GIS is incredible, isn't it? I mean,
It's
the ability to get so much more
It's
information.
wonderful, and it's still in its embryonic stage, I think.
And I can understand the reasoning behind looking at, you need to make sure and have it some information secure to avoid potential terrorist acts too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I didn't get mine answered.
Oh, I'm
Is-
sorry. I was going to read it to you, and then we switched to another question.
That's okay. I just want to know where to look.
Yes, the civil disturbance goal is on page 28 of your packet under the Exhibit 2, and it reads, minimize the loss of life and or property, rescue victims, identify and protect evidence associated with a civil disturbance, terrorist attack, or national security emergency.
Okay, I think I didn't ask the question correctly. I didn't mean just for civil unrest. A general goal of this county, of our agencies planning together and and having compatible and interoperable systems, so that when there is a hazard, an incident of any kind, I don't care if it's civil unrest, I don't care if it's, well, I do care. I don't want any of those things. But regardless of what incident might come under hazard, whether it's a slide, a nuke event, or whatever, I believe one of the major goals in general of the hazards chapter ought to be a statement that it is the goal of this county to, work in such a manner. And I'm not trying to wordsmith it now, but there should be something that says it is our stated goal and policy that we will work toward, interoperability and inter-agency training in all venues to handle the hazards. Because you can talk about OES does this and so does that, but the problem is, can they all do it together if they need to?
That becomes tricky.
I know, I've been through this. That's why I'm asking.
If your board decides to add such a goal, the appropriate place to be would be to place it in section 2.1, which covers the general hazard goals and policies.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I didn't ask the question. I know I heard myself say civil unrest. I meant to say such as, but I'm looking for a general goal. And there's two reasons why I say that. Number one, I think it's the right thing for a general plan to have a goal and a policy in that direction. But secondly, there's a lot of legislation moving through Washington right now in terms of homeland security and incident response that may make grants, et cetera, available for new training and new programs, but we'll be called upon to demonstrate that it is our policy. So there's two sides of me working this one.
Are you going to be making that as a motion when we adopt the staff's recommendation, which would, I assume, would be to return with the appropriate language to
exactly when the time is ripe. And
anybody have anything else?
I don't know.
If I could piggyback onto that, not only within the county, but between county lines. Thank you.
Well, that would be a goal. That would be a goal. Not. I don't think we can state that as a policy, because we can, as a policy, we can state our agencies as a goal with all others. I think. Yes, sir.
Uh, your point is very well taken. I think, just for your information, that it is implied within the program number 5 in terms of the multi-hazards plan. There's a tremendous effort of coordination, and certainly making a goal that overarches that, and then rely upon that particular program basically is the means by which we carry that out.
Right. And yes, it's in there as a program, but it seems to me that in the general plan, and especially at an update time, we ought to be stating a general overall goal and policy, and then implementation through. So, okay. Yeah. I forgot I'm not
Okay.
anymore.
Anything else? Well, I think we basically have 4 staff recommendations, and we just need to work out this, the direction to staff, and perhaps we might be able to. This is a suggestion. Might be able to have staff sort of finesse this issue of a goal versus the policy that you're bringing up in terms of that. But either one of you want to try your hand at wording?
Well, I would move the recommended actions, staff recommended actions, and as part of the motion, request that staff bring back the appropriate wording to be added as a general goal on interoperability and training amongst county agencies, and as possible other surrounding agencies. I don't want to go into the words that would get us where, but if you could bring that back for approval at a separate time, if that's legal, that would be my motion.
Does staff understand that language? Does staff feel confident they understand that language?
Well, in terms of
Mr.
the
Smith.
general direction, yes, and we can craft some language for your consideration. However, if this is really a question to county council, can the board, what is your recommendation in terms of process? Should you just simply continue the entire item so we can bring that wording back? Because I foresee that if we brought it back separately, we'd have to have a separate general plan amendment to do that.
Right.
Oh,
In
we don't want
response
to do that.
Yeah, in response to that question, Mr. Smith is correct. We only have 2 county-initiated general plan amendments available to us. So if we came back a second time, we'd be cutting into that allotment. I think the suggestion to defer and come back with the advised language would be the best route to go.
Okay.
One other option would be that if you can wait to the general plan update program, which deals with primarily transportation issues, but nonetheless includes some other items as well, we could include that in as part of that update as well. But that's going to be about 9 months away.
How long? I'm not doing well today. I've forgotten how to do this now that I'm not chair. Is there a time critical issue in just continuing this to 2 weeks or a future meeting to bring back some language and do it all at once? Are we up against some sort of state deadline or?
No.
No deadline.
Can I ask one question? Does clerk know, do we already have a 1:30 for 2 weeks from now? I suppose we have it right here on our advanced.
Except I lost mine.
I don't believe we have one.
What I wonder, this is just a question, I'm fine, but do the board members, well, we're going to have a long meeting we're going to have a long meeting 2 weeks from now anyway, aren't we? All right, then, I didn't want to call us to a 1:30, have everybody waiting if we just had that one item, but we're going to be here long anyway. So, okay, so the motion is to, what I understand right now, the motion is to continue this for 2 weeks, add the language that Supervisor Michaels articulated in her motion. Staff feels like they understand that. I'm glad staff made some suggestions and recommendations before we voted. It looks like that's it. Anything else? Anything else? All right, so we got a motion from Supervisor Michaels for a continuation with the additional language. Is there a second? Seconded.
Supervisor Parks, did you have something you wanted to add on top of that? Oh, okay.
Great.
I missed. I thought you said.
No. Okay. Any objections? All right. Motion carries. Clerk, you clear on that one? Great.
Okay.
Chair,
Thank you.
this is the first time I've heard that the general plan changes, the circulation element and all aren't going to come back till about November. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I would just like to have, if there are, I know it involves transportation impact mitigation fee adjustments. If there are some major projects that are going to occur that will, because we're waiting so long on that traffic portion, that we will end up losing significant funds, I would like to know about that.
Okay, we can check with Butch Britt and Public Works
Because
Transportation.
we may want to pull that one out
see
separately.
if that's an item. We, in fact, are just in the throes of preparing a memo to the board. It's been some time since you've discussed the general plan update to give you an update on that process and outline the scope for you. We'll talk to Public Works Transportation and include that information if it is relevant.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I think that ends our two 1:30 items, and we're ready to go back to our regular agenda. And our first item on regular agenda is item 37 from the CEO's office, receive and file the Living Wage Advisory Committee final report.
Marty Robinson from the County Exec's office. In May of 2001, your board adopted the Living Wage Ordinance. Along with that ordinance, you created the Living Wage Advisory Committee to overview the implementation, with the specific lifespan to be 18 months after they started. And that time has elapsed, and they have done their job in terms of overseeing the implementation process. They had 10 meetings over that 18-month period, as opposed to the 5 meetings that it said as a minimum in the ordinance. Staff has worked with them. The report you have in front of you is the report required by the ordinance. And if you have any questions, staff is here. I'd like to thank Cheryl Monzon. She worked very closely with the committee to help make this all happen. And as you heard today, she's a wonderful singer. She's also wonderful at dealing with committees.
Go ahead, Supervisor Long.
I'd just like to, one, thank you for the report. And yes, she does have a beautiful voice. But to say that our good friend Murray isn't here today. He had a medical procedure yesterday, and everything's fine. He was in and out, but wouldn't be here today. But he did manage to get on the radio this morning, so on the report. So.
Great. All righty.
Move to receive and file.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Any objections to the motion? Thank you. We receive and file 37.
Thank
Now,
you for your work.
on to item 38. And it's just my recommendation that we appoint Wilmetta Davis, June Howey, and Jane Pendergast to the Casitas Local Recreation Advisory Committee.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Our recommendation of Supervisor Flynn and Parks supports the new legislation with County Transportation Commission.
I think I'll let Supervisor Flynn take this one now. This comes before us because the Ventura County Transportation Commission has come up with a second draft of potential legislation to reorganize the Ventura County Transportation Commission. The second draft incorporates all the items that we had taken as our position as a board if they were going to go and have all the cities on the board. And I bring this forward to you to see if the board wants to approve as is or suggest some changes to it. One potential change that I had put in this report was regarding term limits for alternates. I understand that that also can be handled as the appointing agency. They can determine their own term limits. I know that VCOG had a discussion on the new legislation. I wasn't attending at that meeting, but perhaps Chair Bennett could talk a little bit about that. From what we were told at the VCTC is VCOG, some members said they didn't think there was anything wrong with the present way the VCTC is organized, and if it isn't broken, why fix it? Some, again, went back to discussions of whether we need to have all full board members, but I think since I wasn't there, I'll turn that over to Supervisor Bennett, and he can give us his recollection of that meeting just in terms of what other cities are feeling about this, other than just the representatives that show up at VCTC.
Sure. Thank you. Well, I think Supervisor Park hits the nail on the head. Very fascinating at VCOG, because at VCOG you had different city representatives and the people that had been at VCTC, and all of a sudden you found out that the person sitting at VCTC supposedly representing that city may have been completely out of touch with that city. Camarillo is a classic example. The representative of Camarillo said the VCTC representative never came back and told us about this. We all questioned whether we need it. I would offer these things. I think it probably is germane to this discussion at this point in time. And I was stunned by the number of city representatives at VCOG that said, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with VCTC just like it is. I don't feel like every one of them said, you know, I don't feel like our city has ever been cheated by VCTC in the process. Now, those comments were made by the Camarillo representative, Jan McDonald. They were made by Santa Paula representative, Marianne Krause. Even the city that wants it, City of Ventura, said that, but they had no qualms that any decisions have been made where a city had been objected to. The Ojai representative said the same thing, even though he was in favor of it, but we don't know whether their city is. They will vote on it this evening. And even Bill Davis said, you know, I don't think VCTC is broken. And so it sort of dawned on me at this meeting that what we basically have is we have a few people, maybe a few cities, that feel really strongly that VCT should be reorganized, and most other people saying, I don't feel strongly to not do it, but I don't feel strongly to do it either, and sort of going along with it. And that's part of what's caused some of the ambivalence and some of probably the confusion that is out there. So, number one, I was surprised how many city representatives there said Moore Park really wants it. I believe Thousand Oaks really wants it, although they were not at the VCOG meeting. At least the Thousand Oaks representative has spoken strongly for it. Ventura, I think, says they want it, and I don't know how passionate that I felt that there. That's one observation I would point out. A lot of people are starting to say it's not broken, why fix it? And yet at the same time, I didn't sense most of those cities were willing to say to those cities that really want the change, oh, I want to stand in your way. I'm going to vote no. So it takes me to, I would like to get a sense, obviously I'm the one that brought this sort of revised thing back to this board. I think probably if I'd had this discussion with VCOG, I may have come back with a different motion, but we are where we are at this point in time. There is, unfortunately, they're trying to get this done by the end of January because that's the filing deadline for the legislation. And unfortunately, they put out two versions of the language, which I think creates a lot of mischief. How do you get everybody to vote on one? So what I really am happy about is that Supervisor Parks and Flynn only brought back one version. This is the version if they go this way. But I would like to have the sense of the board to be that we don't believe VCTC is broken. We are not asking for it to be fixed, but we're willing to go along with the reorganization if that's really how the cities feel, right? But if they want to move fast, and that is make the January deadline, this is the only way we would do it. If they want to start tinkering and changing the legislation, then let's take the whole year and do all of that right. And who knows, maybe that will give those cities that don't want to have the reorganization more time to have that discussion and stuff. But that would be the only thing I would add, is that to make sure that it's clear we're not asking for reorganization. We're going along with reorganization if that's what the cities want, but we would be going along only under these provisions if they want to move fast. So you push your...
just to concur with that in the sense that talking with some of the cities in my district, that I think that is the feeling. They're going back now to the question, how did this all start and why are we doing this? Is it really broke? I think there may have been back when times were flush, and that's the other point. Right now, there's no money. And to be able to even do the work that is underway and funds committed may be all that VCTC is able to do for a while. So that in itself gives us time to perhaps revisit, why did we head down this road? I think that there were some smaller cities, and I'll speak to Fillmore. Fillmore felt like they never had a seat on BCTC. Now, that didn't translate to say they never felt they were represented or represented poorly or were cheated on some side of a vote or an allocation, but it was the presence of having a seat on BCTC. So I think there is value in that discussion, but I feel somewhat the same way in the sense of last year, unfortunately, things became convoluted and caused a lot of anxiety and division, and perhaps over the holiday break, people had a chance to take a deep breath and then come back to say, okay, let's go back to why did we start down this path, and what is the real purpose, intent, goal of having a reorganization that has that full representation. So I would agree that perhaps that is what we can send out to the cities in the sense of saying as a board, if there really is, if out of the two proposals that are out there now, if there really is a consensus on one that comes back and it's solid enough, then and it fits what we, I think, expressed pretty clearly last year, that we felt if there's reorganization, we should have an opportunity for some alternate representation, just as the cities do. So,
Okay. Are there other comments out there? Supervisor Michaels,
Yeah, you've
just
heard.
so you guys know, I see your lights on. I don't know whether that means you want to speak or not. If
Oh.
you just give me a little nod.
Oh,
If
okay.
you want to speak. I'm trying to read the lights. Yeah, right.
I've said this before, and it doesn't surprise me at all that you found some cities saying, "Who started this? Why are we doing this?" Because I have long said I thought it was an exercise in wasted time, effort, and money. I agree with Supervisor Bennett in that I'm not going to stand in anybody's way, because what's here fulfills what we had said we would support. And so if this is the actual that they end up with, fine. But I'm not pushing for anything to happen, and I think that it's truly sad when we have so much stuff of importance to deal with, and we have so many financial concerns that we've spent an inordinate amount of time on what's the structure of VCTC when it was working just fine to start with. So I can go along with the chair's comments and recommendation. I won't stand in the way, but quite frankly, I don't care which way it goes. And I've said that in the press.
I would make one observation that was made by Councilmember Krause from Santa Paula. She said, it's kind of an interesting thing. If we go from 7 members where you have 3 cities and 2 supervisors, and that kind of thing, they more have the responsibility to represent the whole county. And if you go to everybody having their own representation, then there's more of a responsibility to sort of say, take care of your own city or your own district kind of mentality. I thought it was an interesting observation, but again, we're there. Ask the indulgence of the board. We have a city council member from Ventura that's walked in after we started, and if you would like to address us on this issue, I'd be happy to let you, Mr. Morehouse, just because we don't want to have this on our agenda too many times. We'd like to do it all efficiently while we got everybody here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm on my break time. I want to make that clear, bosses.
All right.
But I did feel compelled, at least from the city of Ventura's perspective as a representative. I do have the unusual situation of sitting both on VCOG and VCTC, so I have heard this, as does Joe DeVito from the city of Ojai. Again, the genesis, I think, was pointed out at the VCOG meeting and brought up by Councilmember Sharkey from Port Hueneme. Goes clear back to, I think it was 1998 or so, before I even got on the city council, and Jack Tingstrom was there, and there was discussion about should there be full representation. Were they going to oust the 2 citizen representatives? I know Roma was sitting on there at the time. She was very concerned about the loss of that position. But the most recent genesis comes as a result of two things. One is a complete consternation on the part of the city of Thousand Oaks to not have a voting seat. And Dennis Gillette has been sitting there for a lengthy period of time, I think something like 6 years, 8 years, and not moved up into one of the voting seats. Similarly, the city of Ventura is sitting down now, and we lost it on a rotation when Tingstrom fell off and I came on. Oddly enough, the force that's been most frustrated by this is the city of Port Hueneme, which just lost a seat. They had a seat there, and when their elected got off, they lost the whole seat, because the way the current thing is set up is it's kind of bizarre, but if your person is not running again and you can hold the seat, if they declare that they want to keep it, I think it's kind of the way of wording it. Moorpark got to retain their seat. Keith Millhouse became chair, although Wozniak was set to do that, so they kept the seat. Oxnard didn't lose their seat. Holden went off. Mulhart got it. And Don Gunderson left Fillmore, and Patty Walker got it. And so I'm still sitting down. I feel frustrated for City of Ventura, sitting down at what I call the little kids table. Like Thanksgiving, you got the adults and the kids table, and unable to have a voting seat in this. So it has probably been the city of Thousand Oaks and Ventura as much as anybody, not leading the charge, but strongest in our position to sit up there and have a voting seat. I don't think it's a matter of feeling a lack of adequate representation. I think it's, we bandied about, and you talk, Supervisor Michaels, about ad nauseum. Believe me, I've told people this is like Groundhog's Day. I keep revisiting this argument over and over for an hour and a half, 2 hours at a time. But the problem is that in the case of Ventura, we would like to be up there and have an official vote rather than just an advisory vote. But we understand that supervisors also have, within each one of your districts, a major metropolitan base. And you're not going to, any threat, and I've argued this both ways. I've argued it inside of the county. I don't see any of you turning renegade. I don't see it being a city versus county thing. It could be an east-west county thing, people ganging up. John Sharkey points out realistically they're kind of an unusual situation. I guess they're double or triple covered by supervisor districts within Port Hueneme, so they could actually gain 2 or 3 votes. So that becomes the bizarrety of how you divvy it up. But again, the city of Ventura's position has been strong, at least up through the past council, to have a voting seat. Now we have 2 new members, and I will revisit that dependent upon your body's decision. But we were reluctant to make any other further moves. We had supported the last piece of legislation. We're fine with it as it was. The official position of the council was we didn't mind whether it was 2 supervisors or 5 supervisors. We didn't care if there were citizen reps or not. All we wanted was a shot at the big kids table. And on the rotation right now, we won't get there for a while. The only way I can get there is if one of the 3 cities or 2 of the 3 cities fails to show up, and then the next in line would be Thousand Oaks to move up, and I would move up as an alternate, and that's the way we get a voting seat. So to fairly represent my city's position is we're not real strong on the positions whether there's 2 or 5 of you. Love to have 5 of you. Personally, myself, I think it'd be good to have the representation, but I realize it demands on your time. The problem with having alternates, unlike us, if I cannot come, the city can appoint another elected representative. You have no other elected representatives to send, and that makes it very awkward. The VCTC at the meeting prior to this last one discussed the unusual legislation that was passed in the city of Riverside, which basically special state legislation that actually allows one of their supervisors to function as a proxy. So any one of you could carry somebody else's vote and at that time vote yes and no simultaneously. You know, it causes schizophrenia, but that's a doable thing if we wanted to model ourselves a la what's been done in Riverside, though I don't think they're always the best model for anything. Anyway, I'm being recorded. So that's kind of where we are in terms of my perspective on it. And again, it's the wishes of the board. If you want to have full representation, all 5 of you, if you think it's important that 2 citizen reps be there, if you feel like you have alternates, that's fine. But again, expressing currently the message I'm carrying, and I will revisit this in 2 weeks. I made a promise last night at my council meeting. I will take it back after your decision, but we would like a voting seat, and we feel very strongly about that. And as I said, does Thousand Oaks. I think the rest of the cities were kind of, as Supervisor portrayed them, give and take. Ojai, yeah, that seemed to be in the, if it's if it's not broken, don't fix it. Same with Mayor Davis from Simi Valley. Uh, I think Fillmore was a little bit different, a little more would like to have, but they've already got a voting seat, and Moore Park already has one as well. So, anyway, that's kind of a synopsis.
The first position the board took was to solve this problem, keep the same structure, but just increase the rotation so the cities get there faster. It didn't feel like that got very much consideration. It was just like summarily dismissed. No, we want a seat. Would that be your perception? Was that given a lot of consideration at VCTC? That's just increase the rate of rotation.
I think that's probably a fair synopsis, that one didn't get an airing, and I think it's also fair that Councilmember Sharkey's comments was, why is there suddenly a rush now when it wasn't a rush? This has been basically around for 8 years now, 9 years. Why the hurry up? Well, the hurry up was in part because we had this really screwy instance 2 years ago where we had a bunch of people that were already up there shifting because several weren't not running again. Holden wasn't running, Gunderson wasn't running, Wozniak wasn't running, and then what did that mean to the rotation of the seats? So it really got kind of bizarre because everybody was thinking, well, it's my chance to move up, and no, the city held the spot. But to look at how to redo the rotation might be better, but again, where you've got all kinds of full voting, as I've told you, Chair Bennett, is that, it's kind of awkward. I had no say on it because, the vote was taken, and I'm still at the little kids' table. All I can do is voice my opinion, but the final vote rests with the 7 individuals who are up there.
Thank you very much for coming down. Thanks for giving your perspective.
Thanks for indulging me. I'll make sure I mark my time card accordingly.
Thank you. For the benefit of the board, I don't think that one alternative did get explored real completely, and that is the issue. But the thing that I would offer, and while Councilmember Morehouse here, is it strikes me that we had an expectation problem show up 2 years ago, and that is some council members are getting voted off. We just weren't running for re-election or whatever, and the other representatives assumed they were going to get those seats, and I don't know why anybody would have that expectation. If let's say Moore Park had only been on 1 year, well, then Moore Park should get to finish their term. Nobody would say they can only finish their term if the person that Moore Park appointed is going to be reelected. If that's the case, every city would quickly appoint somebody new who they knew was going to be around. So it strikes me as a little bit odd that people kind of almost, I don't want to use a pejorative word, but people inappropriately were sort of saying, hey, we might be able to speed the rotation up just because somebody decided not to run. That strikes me as probably part of the nexus of the frustration that was out there. But with that being the case, I would simply add Supervisor Parks.
A little bit more background, and I also appreciated the discussion, the idea that some cities feel that they would like to be at the table, the big people's table, but they're not complaining about how the funds are allocated. That really is what the basis of all this is about. But just a little bit more background. At the VCTC meeting, I think it was Councilmember Morgan was saying, well, forget what the supervisors want. Let's all as cities get together and just, pursue it without the supervisors. But Louise Rishoff with Fran Pavley's office, Assemblymember Pavley, came and said that the Assembly member very much, and she's looking at sponsoring the bill, the Assembly member very much wants to have the board behind any legislation that goes out, which I appreciated. And John Flynn wanted to know if it could just be a consensus of the board. It had to be if it could be 3 members of the board. Anyway, that was a bit of a joke. But because the whole point here is it's very difficult to get consensus. And Port Hueneme, Tony from Port Hueneme again said that they will not support all 5 board members. And yet I heard Councilmember Rosenbluth say that he thought that was equitable. So I don't know if we're getting the full picture from just the representatives before us at VCTC. The upshot of it all was they decided to put it on Assemblymember Pavley to do a spaceholder bill, and we will come back and decide whether we want to move forward or not with the legislation, because they didn't have time to get a consensus of all the cities with this new legislation. I don't know if Assemblymember Pavley is that interested in putting a placeholder out there when there may not be a consensus, and she would have to, then take it away and upset some people. So I suggested that we have a special meeting once you get that consensus, once they've had the opportunity to hear what the board has voted, go out to their cities and see if they still want to change it, and then have a special meeting so that they can meet these deadlines for legislation. So I'm not exactly sure if where it stands at this point, but I think we may end up having a special meeting to then say we do have a consensus and go to the assembly member that way, which is the way she'd prefer it.
Well, and another possibility is if there's not a special meeting is to go back to Councilmember Sharkey's comments, which is what's the rush? Take the time this year, get all the stuff hammered out and introduce the legislation. That'd be another possibility that I certainly would support. Well, with that being the case, we have. I'd like to just add to the motion. The motion be that the board, if there's going to be, I'm going to change it a little bit. If there's going to be reorganization of VCTC, this is the only legislation that we would support for moving. If we're going to move quickly, if they want to modify, then we think they need to take the time to do that right. So we're not modifying at the last minute before the bill. But that it is the board's sense that VCTC is not broken. We're not asking. We prefer that it not be reorganized, but we're willing to go along with reorganization if that is the will of the cities that are out there. That'd be my motion.
Second. For discussion.
And I can support that motion with the knowledge that I know that Thousand Oaks is the next to rotate in, because it is true that, and the cities that most object to it are the ones that aren't up there, but they're about to rotate on, and that's how I can support it. But I do like your proposal of maybe a 2-year term instead of 4-year terms, so people don't have to wait so long to be on it. But that's how I can support it.
Yeah, if you went to the 2-year part, you could really, you could get cities ripping through a whole lot faster than 4 years is a long time to do the rotation and all of that. Okay, that's the motion, seconded by Supervisor Michaels. Any objection to the motion? All right. Motion carries. Thanks again, Councilmember Morehouse. Item 40, and this is Supervisor Michaels.
Right, and I bring this to the board merely because it was brought to my office as chair at the time when we started this letter, and it's been kind of on again, off again. But Mr. Wilson is currently chair of the retirement board, and his term is up. He is the board's appointment, and I recommend him. He at one point was vice president of the Taxpayers Association. Very level-headed, good business sense. I have not found him to lean more toward the employees or more toward the county, and I think that's what's important. I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to have somebody that leaned our way, but just his thought process and his practical thinking and his business background tends to make him voice the same types of opinions and discussions that we have voiced in terms of the retirement system. So I'm recommending him for reappointment for another 4-year term. And like I said, he currently serves as chair. I spoke with Van Paris, and he finds him to be a very good board member and a good chair. And so that's the knowledge I bring.
Okay. It's been
that
moved.
Is a motion.
Moved and seconded. I just like to take this opportunity to say I think we have to be very careful about our appointments to the Retirement Association. When you think about it, the most important decisions we make are the decisions that deal with salaries and benefits in terms of the budget. So when this nomination came forward, I did call Supervisor Michaels. I did try to do some research on this gentleman, and I certainly support the recommendation, but I would take this time to remind the board of how critical the members of the Retirement Association are to the fiscal health and integrity of Ventura County. Any objection? All right. Motion carries. Item 41. Approval to receive the second-year grant funding from the Annie Casey Foundation Probation Agency.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mr. Johnston, nice to see you all this afternoon. I'm asking your board to approve the receipt of $126,855 from the Annie E. Casey Foundation. There is no match. This is the second year of funding. It's not a large amount of money, but I do think that the result of this and this effort that we are making will in fact result in some significant savings this year and in future years. Our focus, the first couple of years with this organization, has really been helping us manage the overcrowding in our existing facilities while waiting for the new facilities to open. And that effort has proven to be successful. When I say that effort, it's not just the probation agency, but on our core committee, we have both the juvenile court judges, we have representation from the district attorney's office, public defender's office, police agencies, as well as probation. So it has been a collaborative effort. Our focus has been taking a close look at alternatives to detention. As you know, detention is very expensive. So we have been analyzing everything we do in that respect, making some changes, modification. The number one criterion in looking at alternatives is to not expose the community to additional risk. And we've been able to do that, those alternatives, without in fact exposing this community to additional risk. We'll continue in the future to look at those practices, but we'll also, with the opening of the new JJC, we'll focus on evaluating all of our programs within the institution and spending more time in this upcoming year and looking at the issue of disproportionate minority confinement. So with that, I'm open to questions, and I do think, as I said, there's not match, there's no real strings attached to this money, so I would certainly ask your board to approve the receipt of the funds.
First, any questions for Mr. Remington? Any comments?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
And I did want to comment, it has had some remarkable effect. If you're showing a 26% decrease from 2001, that is significant, and I'm glad to see that we're not resting on those laurels, that even with a larger facility, we're going to continue this program, and it's wonderful to have this grant available.
And Supervisor, those facilities, and I have to, on occasion, remind folks that those facilities were built to last many, many years, and so our goal certainly is not to fill them up. We can't afford it. Our experience in this area says we don't need to at this point in time. We're looking at some tremendous cuts this coming year, so I think if we can do things more effectively and also save money, that's the ideal. That's what we're looking for.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Any objections? Hearing none, the motion carries. Item 42, Sheriff's Department. Approval.
Thanks, Cal, for hanging in all day.
Well, last couple times I've had an agenda item, I listen in my office, and as we get near, sometimes the board will have a tendency to speed up. So today I said, I'm not going to rush over. I'm going to be there. There could be a question or two about the consent agenda, and of course this happens to be one of those days when things didn't really speed up. But I think it's always good on occasion for department head to spend some time looking at the board, watching the board, some of the broader issues that this board deals with, and so from that standpoint, Johnny, I hope it was productive spending a little more time today with the board than I normally would. So, thanks.
It's wise of you to say it was productive to be here with us today. Very good.
Well, I think Judy's idea of the CD but I think we ought to add Colby to that. Colby and the county choir, and maybe we can make some money on that CD.
All right. Let's move on, please. Item 42, the Sheriff's Department. Thanks a lot, Cal. Application for additional funding under the 2003 Emergency Management Program.
Good afternoon, Dale Carnathan with the Sheriff's Office of Emergency Services. This is a request for your board to ratify an application for additional funding that's being provided through the State Office of Emergency Services. These are funds that are provided by FEMA under their Emergency Management Program grant process. That's a mouthful. These are additional funds over and above what was already allocated and accepted by this board earlier in the fiscal year. We intend to use these to offset the cost of hiring an additional staff person to work as a liaison between the operational area coordinator, that's my boss Laura, and the 10 cities and many special districts that are now participating in the emergency management activities of Ventura County.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Move approval.
And I'd like to second, and just also, I'm glad that there are these funds available. I know the sheriff has said that on top of everything else, having to spend funds on emergency preparedness is just another burden to bear. So I'm glad that these funds are available. Thank you.
Seconded by Supervisor Parks.
Question.
Any objections?
Chair Bennett, is my understanding this will come back with budgetary adjustments when the application is granted? Because this is just to apply, not to accept.
Is that your understanding also?
Yeah, this
Sheriff's
is just the application.
I'm looking at it right now.
See, item is agendized with a 4/5 vote requirement. I didn't think that was necessary for an application.
No, this is a grant application. It says right on it. So it would have to come back to us for
receive the
acceptance.
funds, right. Okay. Good. We have that understanding. Thank you for clarifying that. Item 43. This is the Sheriff's Department. Also authorization to submit the Governor's 2003 Service and Volunteerism Community Emergency Response Teams. Great.
Once again, Dale Carnathan, Sheriff's OES. This is a grant process that came out of the President's Office of Volunteerism, his GoServe process. It's been replicated at the state office with the Governor's Office on Volunteerism, and they are providing pass-through monies for grants for us to try and expand and extend the reach of our community emergency response team programs in Ventura County. Currently, there are CERT teams in the cities of Simi Valley, Oxnard. We're starting a program in the city of Santa Paula. There are disaster action response teams in Thousand Oaks, Camarillo, and the Channel Islands Beach Community Services District. And we hope to expand the CERT program throughout the county. And this will enable us to provide staff support to accomplish that, volunteer training, and to acquire more trainers to continue that process.
Thank you very much.
Move the item.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Parks and Michaels. Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 44.
Move to receive and file.
Moved and seconded. Hearing no objections, motion carries. Mr. CEO, looks like you want to say something before we adjourn?
The question was raised earlier today about whether or not we should, or not the question, but the request to be lobbying in Washington, D.C. as well as Sacramento on that penalty for,
right.
And Sue Hughes' office has already commenced that process. It's
okay.
underway.
For great foresight, right? I would two things at the end of the first public session of our board meeting is encourage you guys to pop your hand up or something. I'm trying to guess whether you want to speak, so maybe my vision's not great. The other is I think we're going to go back into closed session now, and I think we just have to recognize, particularly we only have 2 meetings in January, I think 3 meetings in February. We have 2 in February. We should just plan on these things are going to be all days. We should just plan on Tuesdays, morning and afternoon. We're going to be here in the boardroom. It'd be healthy for us to plan that way because I think we're all going to be frustrated if we think we're going to be getting out of here at 1:30 or 1 o'clock or whatever. Certainly be nice if it happens, but given the tight budget crunches and all the things that are coming up, it's probably something we should be aware of. And so we adjourn to closed session. Do we have to make any announcement?
There will be no announcement.
Great, thank you.